From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the African and Middle Eastern Division. I'm Mary Jane Deeb, Chief of the Division, and I'm delighted to see you all for what promises to be a fascinating program. Last year, the African Middle East Division's Africa section, in partnership with the Poetry and Literature Center and the Africa Society of the National Summit on Africa, launched a new series called Conversations with African Poets and Writers. The series consists of a set of live webcast interviews with established and emerging poets, short story writers, novelists, and playwrights from the African continent and the African diaspora. Programs include readings and a moderated discussion led by staff in the African section of the library's African Middle East Division. We've had Professor Ali Mazrui, the Albert Schweitzer Professor in the Humanities at Binghamton University, who gave us an overview of the African literary scene today. We had Susan Kiguli, a wonderful Ugandan poetess and scholar. We have Kieropetsi Kegositsil, the poet laureate of South Africa, and Donato Nodongo, one of the most important writers from the Republic of Guinea. And we also had Helon Habila, an award-winning Nigerian writer who teaches at George Mason University. In 2008, we had a conference on the famous Nigerian writer Chinua Achebe to celebrate the 50th anniversary of his book, Things Fall Apart. You can access these videotape programs on our division's website, www.loc.gov/RRAMED. And today, we're launching our second year of the series, together with our partners, the Poetry and Literature Center and the Africa Society of the National Summit on Africa. Unfortunately, Bernadette Paulo, the president of the Africa Society, is in New York and will be unable to join us today. Our speaker today is Mandlakayise C. Matyumza, the head of the Center for the Book in South Africa. He is the guest of John Cole, who is the director and founder of the Centers for the Book, which exist in all 50 states and in many, many countries around the world. The interview today will be conducted by one of our area specialists for Southern Africa, Laverne Page, who has worked in this division for over 30 years and has lived and traveled all over Africa. And now, Robert Casper, the head of the library's Poetry and Literature Center here at the Library of Congress, will say a few words.
Thank you, Mary Jane. We at the Poetry and Literature Center are delighted to be a part of the Conversations with African Poets and Writers series, now kicking off its second season. I could not be prouder of the voices this series has brought to the library and to celebrate the literary work from throughout Africa in America's capital. As Mary Jane said, this series began as a partnership with the Center and the African and Middle Eastern Division at the library, as well as with the Africa Society. I am pleased this event marks our first collaboration with the library's Center for the Book as well. For over 30 years, the Center for the Book has promoted books, reading, literacy, and libraries. Our reader today, Matyumza, has a special connection to our new co-sponsor. Mr. Matyumza works as the executive head of the South African Center for the Book, started just 12 years after its American counterpart. Here to introduce Mr. Matyumza is John Cole, the founding director of the Library Center for the Book and one of the leading lights of this institution for the past 45 years. John.
Thank you, Rob, very much. I'm here to introduce my new friend, relatively new friend, and my colleague, Matyumza. He's a writer and a poet, as you know, And as Rob has said, he is the executive head of the Center for the Book in the National Library of South Africa. And he's held that position since 2007. This is a sister center for the book, whose creation back in 1998, what I'm very proud to be able to say, it was inspired in part by the National Center for the Book here at the Library of Congress and by our activities. Mandla graduated from Transkei University, now called Walter Sisulu University. He graduated in 1994 and received an advanced honors degree the next year. Until 2001, he was a researcher at the university in its Bureau for African Research and Documentation. So we have a researcher as well as a poet and an executive head and a writer. So we have a multi-talented man here. For the next 2 years, he was program manager at the Islamva Community Development Center, and then he became the project manager of the South African National Heritage Council. Then, if you're following my chronology, he came to the Center for the Book, the South African Center for the Book. And I was fortunate to visit him in June in Cape Town briefly, and since I love brochures, of course, I picked up the brochure of the National Library of South Africa and went right to the Center for the Book page, and it turns out that Mandla is the author of this one-page description of the Center for the Book. I will read it and then turn it over to him to concentrate on his poetry, his literature, and his writings. Center for the Book, of course spelled R-E, which took me a while to get used to. The Center for the Book in the National Library of South Africa aims to encourage the development of a national literary culture by promoting the writing, publishing, marketing, distribution, reading, and easy access to books for all South Africans. Its core functions are book development, lobbying, advocacy, and raising public awareness, and it serves as a hub of information and advice for the book world. The Center runs a number of projects in support of these aims, some of which have been developed specifically for children. So please join me in welcoming Manda Matyumza. Manda.
Thank you, John. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will start by greeting you in my native language. I am a Xhosa, the language where our former president, Nelson Mandela, comes from. In my language, regardless of whether it is morning, evening, or afternoon, you say molweni, and then you respond by saying away. Let me write molweni, away. Thank you. Please accept greetings from our former president and statesman Nelson Mandela, who is in good health in Gunu, outside Mthatha in the Eastern Cape. I am so pleased this morning. To stand before you to share the state of writing, publishing, reading in South African indigenous languages. Ladies and gentlemen, 2012 marks a milestone in the history of South Africa, that the oldest liberation movement, the African National Congress, is celebrating 100 years of selfless struggle against white domination. 18 years into our democracy and freedom, there are a lot of achievements to celebrate and cherish, such as equal education, such as equal education, freedom of association, movement, freedom of expression, etc. South Africa is the only country I know worldwide to have 11 official languages. What this means is that South Africans are free to be serviced in any of these languages. This is a milestone, especially to us writers who are writing in these indigenous languages, because we are free to write and publish without fear in our own native languages. We are, however, not naive about this right, as other African countries are still miles away to achieve that. Ngugi wa Thiong'o lamented about this in his speech presented at the South African Literary Awards ceremony that took place in July this year. That, and I quote, but in most African countries, before and more so after independence, the majority are denied access to their languages because the state has marginalized them to the point of official invisibility. And close quote. In Kenya, reported Ngugi that in 2011, the government voted to ban African languages in public places, and this despite provision in the new constitution to give life to these languages. Fortunately, in South Africa, it is not the case as in Kenya. However, South Africans are continuing to alienate indigenous languages themselves. Majority of parents continue to send their children to English medium schools and further forbid their children to speaking these languages at home, which is a setback. Another setback is majority of writers, both established and budding writers, increasingly are writing and publishing in English. Less and less reading material in indigenous languages is produced for general readership. Instead, books that are currently produced in indigenous languages are tailored for school market. You don't get these books in for general market. Once again, our native languages are grossly affected by the status quo. Less and less people read books published in these languages. The youth are the worst culprits. It is easy and disheartening, ladies and gentlemen, to hear them, the youth now, boasting about not able to read and write in their home languages in South Africa. And not only the youth, it's so easy these days to find a parent proudly saying that my child cannot speak isiXhosa. It is really disheartening. The study published by the South African Book Development Council in 2007 confirmed this, that South Africa is not a reading nation. 1 out of 7 people read a book daily. This status quo has an adverse effect to authors and publishers. Authors want to write and make a living in their writing, but they can't if there are no people to buy and read their books. Publishers want to continue publishing, but can't if these books will not bring dividends. Instead, gather dust in their bookshelves. Remember, publishing any book is a business decision. The study produced by the Publishers Association of South Africa, we acronym it as PASA, Publishers Association of South Africa, reveals that a best-selling book in South Africa sells approximately 5,000 copies in the first print run in a country with 55 million people. These are the books published in English. It is worse with books published in indigenous languages. We are, however, not folding our hands and wait for Jesus Christ to come down and have mercy on us. The National Library of South Africa, together with the Department of Arts and Culture, the Department of Arts and Culture and the National Library of South Africa, through Center for the Book, has embarked in an intensive campaign to revive the use of South African indigenous languages. In 2008, the National Library of South Africa started a project to reprint books that are considered classics in indigenous languages. This project was done in phases through public and private sector partnership. It is now in the third phase, and 68 titles have been reprinted in all the 9 indigenous languages. And more than 2 million books are now in circulation. We have spent about 10 million rands on this project to date. These books are distributed to all libraries, and some are donated to schools and book clubs. These books are exhibited at all literary events, and the project is yielding good results thanks to the media that is also on our side. These books are generating a lot of interest to the general public, especially adults. However, we are monitoring the youth behavior in as far as these books are concerned. This and more other programs of the Center for the Book Hope will help get South Africa reading again, and more so read in their native languages. I would like to end my talk with a quotation from our statesman, Nelson Mandela, in his book, Long Walk to Freedom. Sorry. And I quote, "If you talk to a man in English, you talk to his mind. And if you talk to him in his native language, you talk to his heart." Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As an author myself who is writing and publishing in isiXhosa, which is my home language, I was so thrilled this morning when I came into this room to see my book in the United States of America. I said, wow, you guys, you're doing a great job, and congratulations. I will read briefly in my language so that you also enjoy the richness of our language, which is a language spoken by about 3 million people in South Africa, or about 4, I'm not quite sure really. isiXhosa is number 2 after isiZulu in their chronology. If you can go to the website by Pan South African Languages Board, it will give you the language usage in South Africa in terms of languages. There is isiZulu, isiXhosa, then you Sesotho, English, Afrikaans. So English is really, as much as we speak it, it's not spoken by everyone in South Africa. Remember, South Africa is also a rural country. I am going to read briefly in this book. This was or is a collection of my essays that I published in 1995 in South Africa. And I will try not to read it all so that I don't bore you, because I know you will not be following this. Obushushu. Xa ilanga litshisa umhlaba de abantu babhunxe nezinto abazinxibileyo okanye bahlale phansi kwemithi, kuthiwa ilanga lishushu. Ukuba umfazi ubase umlilo endlwini, abantu nabo bothile bathi ngefuthe lomlilo bakhethe ukuchasela emlilweni. Uyakuva umuntu ongenayo evela phandle esithi akushushu ngako apha endlwini. Nanko umuntu elele ngeengubo zakhe ezininzi emandlalweni wakhe. Suka ngoku aleleyo abile, akhethe ukuzombula, azikhabele kude iingubo zakhe. Loo nquliqo sukube eyenza sukuba ibangelwa bubushushu bengubo. Loo nto ithethe ukuba ubushushu obu abuthandwa ncam ngabantu. Ubushushu ke kodwa naxa bunjalo buyafuneka, kuba ngabo abantwana bakhula kamsinyane. Xa ungena endlwini yomdlezana, wasoloko ufika kushushu ngenxa yomlilo osoloko ubasiwe. Ukuze uthi xa uphosa iliso emandlalweni, ufike iingubo zininzi kakhulu, kuba kaloku kombathiswe olu sana ukuze luhlale lufudumele, ukuze lukhule. Isikhukukazi senkukhu asiwaqanduseli amaqanda esingakhange siwafukame. Ngani ukuba kube njalo? Kungokuba la maqanda angekhoyo apha akabufumananga ubushushu obenziwe sesi sikhukukazi kula maqanda asiwafukemeyo. Ukuze kuvele amantshontsho akhule kanjalo, kufuneka kuhlale kufudumele. Kungobo bushushu ke apho iqanda lithi liqanduseleke, ukanti ikwabobo bushushu obuthi bukhulise amantshontsho. Umlimi ulima izithole zakhe zemifuno okanye zeziqhamo ukuze ke azibukele zikhula zidlamkile, kuba kaloku uzikhuthalele ngokuzinkcenkceshela yonke imihla. Kuthi kunjalo suka kufike isaqhwithi sengqele esiqhaqhazelisa amazinyo. Sisaquphe ukubona loo mifuno sele inzonzotheka, ichachatheka, iqothole ngenxa yamahlwanzi lawo iwavayo. Amagqabi suka abune ngokukhawuleza. Xa ulondlele ufika ezi ziqhamo nale mifuno indinda ndawonye, ingathi ingakhulu, kuba kaloku kunqongophele ubushushu. Nje ukuba kukhe kwavela ilanga, wakho nobushushu obukhawulezayo, wabona ngamagqabi eswabuluka ngokukhawuleza, nango eshukushukuma, kanti kancinci ngathi agcotyiswe bobo bushushu abuvayo. Briefly here, ladies and gentlemen, I am comparing or talking about the advantages and disadvantages caused by heat, where I am in Africa in particular. When you go to the bed where that child is lying, that bed the child is covered with warm blankets, and there is this continuous fire that is inside there to keep that child warm so that the child can grow. I am also talking about that when you grow vegetables, for them to grow, they need warmth, they need energy. At the same time, that same energy, if it is too much, it becomes dangerous to those plants. So in a nutshell, that is what I am talking about in this essay, which says Obushushu, the warmth. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I will now sit down and take a few questions from you.
Moreni.
Away.
Was that correct?
Yeah.
Moreni.
Yeah, Molweni. But because I'm one, it's the singular and plural. When people like this, you say Molweni. When you are referring to me alone, you say Molo.
Molo.
Yes, away.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. It's enlightening for us to hear you speak about literature in South Africa, and also to hear you speak about your work. At the library, we have many visitors, many researchers with a variety of questions. And you said something about our collection, which I was very gratified about. We have your work here. We have your work. We have works of your colleagues and other Xhosa-speaking people from South Africa. We have hundreds of items, but we not only have individual books, essays, collections of poetry, but we also have literary criticism, which is also quite helpful for people who are studying about literature. And I pulled a few items from our collection to show you later. Collections, anthologies, just large collections, I think, and it may be of interest to you. I'm curious also about what you might have in your collection in Cape Town that reflects the Xhosa people and Xhosa writers. I wrote out a few questions so that we could learn more about you and more about writing in South Africa. And you mentioned youth, which is always something important, striking and revealing, I think, about a culture to find out about what the children and youth are doing. Concerning you, let's start with you. And I'm curious about when you started writing and what you prefer. Essays, short stories, or poetry?
Thank you very much. I started writing, I guess it was in 1986, after I matriculated in Kumbu, where I was born and raised. Apparently, I developed fond of my language because my teacher was so inspirational to me. And I started scribbling poetry. And I would show it to him to endorse it. And then he would say, good stuff. And then one day, something came to me. I saw myself writing this drama. Then I got kids in my village to act some pieces of this drama. And I started seeing people crying. I said, hey, there must be something in me. Now I'm talking about writing and not publishing. Then I went to university. Then in 1992, if my memory serves me well, I started writing poetry. And I didn't want to write this poetry in English because and I prefer to write it in my isiXhosa because that's only then that I am comfortable in expressing myself in my motherland, in my mother tongue, and also knowing that this language for me is a language that I have been inherited from my mother, from my father. It's a language that I communicate, that I got from my ancestors. So I decided I did not make a conscious decision to say I want to write in my language, but I think something that was inborn to say, I am writing in my language. And in 1992, I wrote a lot of poems that some of them were not published, but a few of them were published in a book that, as I speak with you, it is in circulation in schools in Transkei, a collection of an anthology collection by Luata and Kamata. It has got three collections. Isibane 1, 2, and 3. So my poems appeared in Isibane 1, 2, all of them in isiXhosa. So that was my first piece to appear in a published book. It started appearing in 1992, if my memory serves me well. And from there, then I started because I was growing then and I was also reading. I'd also like to share with you, colleagues, that with us, Xhosa speakers, we are not into writing too much. We are into talking, into our poetry is more spontaneous, where a poet will just stand up and start doing his or her own thing spontaneously. But because now I was at a university and I was studying towards my degree and I was doing isiXhosa that because I had passed my matric, I got B in isiXhosa. Then I said, let me now start doing research and read more and find out who has written what in my isiXhosa. And I started writing. But if I can answer your question, I started writing poetry. And then the rest came after. Now I write historical novel, I write essays, I write short stories as well.
Thank you very much. Do many of your friends, your colleagues also write in isiXhosa? isiXhosa. Do many of them also write in their mother language or in English?
From my talk, I refer to that yes, some of my colleagues do write in isiXhosa, but most of them prefer to write and express themselves in English, citing a lot of reasons for that. That there is no culture of reading and even culture of buying books in South Africa, especially amongst us Africans. And therefore, if you want to reach more audience, because English is a medium, is an international language. Now, to reach more audience, then they prefer to write in English, and they say, if you write in isiXhosa, then you don't reach wider audience. So yes, my friends, some write in English and some write in isiXhosa, but now the trend in South Africa, but is that they prefer to write in English because they say if you write in English, your audience is wider than when you write in a native language.
Poets also say that and think that?
Interestingly, yes. Before I close, I will share with you some of the research that we have done at Center for the Book. Yes, poets prefer and are increasingly writing in English, but they also do poetry performance in isiXhosa. And I can recall when I was criticizing one of the young poets in Cape Town. She does beautiful poetry in isiXhosa, and we have assisted her to publish her first book of poetry in isiXhosa. But when she stands up to address or to render her piece, she would say first, I am sorry, I am going to render this piece in isiXhosa. And then I ask her, why are you apologetic about your language? Why? Stand up. We are in a free country. About 9 indigenous languages are official. Be proud of who you are and be proud of your language. So my point then is, yes, poets increasingly prefer to express themselves in English more than isiXhosa, but you still get those who express themselves in isiXhosa.
I have a series of questions here which relate to language and poetry, so I'll read them rather than paraphrasing. Many of us first heard isiXhosa through the voice of Miriam Makeba and her Pata Pata song from the 1960s, which according to YouTube is her most famous song. And it's still quite popular. And there's a click sound that many of us foreigners find quite appealing. And because poetry or lyrics are poetry, and there are always sounds, I was thinking that there would be more poetry in isiXhosa. That was why I asked the question. And I'm wondering, in terms of language and sound, what your opinion is of how we foreigners react to the melodic sound of isiXhosa, the pops and clicks, and there's another sound. How do you react to that?
You will be surprised that not only foreigners are inspired by isiXhosa as a language, even fellow South Africans, because of the beauty of the language. And I guess when you were listening to me reading, you also listened to me as I was navigating my words, clicking nicely, and Miriam, may her soul rest in peace, popularized our language here in States, and she did that wonderfully in music and in poetry as well. I don't know how to respond to your question, but what I can say is it's not only foreigners, really, also South Africans themselves. When a Xhosa person stands up and start addressing people in isiXhosa, people will say, shh, please, we want to listen. And thanks to, I guess, the history of our language, because they say we got these clicks from Khoisan people that we found in Eastern Cape that have got this click sound.
So, and some of those click sounds is so difficult to translate them. Yeah, it's so difficult to translate them. You try to translate, you lose the meaning.
Thank you. I'm wondering about the Center for the Book and its involvement in popularizing poetry or writing among the youth in Cape Town. You expressed yourself. You already mentioned that youth are not necessarily interested in reading. I'm wondering though about music, contemporary music, because again, the lyrics are poetic. Regardless of the content, it's still poetry. Does that in any way affect reading? Also, I was wondering about popular forms of literature such as graphic novels or comic books, and then there was the series that was done on President Mandela. School-age children, what they might read in. You did mention that there's publishing in indigenous languages for school-age children. Is that in any way increasing the reading, the need for reading, what is that doing? How is that affecting?
Yeah. I want to say that first, the Center for the Book, as John was introducing me, is an outreach or a specialist unit of the National Library of South Africa. And its principal mandate is to promote culture of reading, writing, and publishing in South Africa. As much as we are based in Cape Town, but our scope is national. And what we've got a whole lot of these programs that we have to promote reading, love of reading, publishing, and these programs are biased, I must say, biased towards writing and publishing in our native languages, and also what we do. I was telling John some other time here to say, we've got a writer's grant at the Center for the Book where we're saying we will only give you this money to publish poetry, to publish fiction, work of creative art, if you write in your native language. And now we start seeing that trend, that now, because there is an incentive, now they're starting to come up writing in indigenous language, but slowly, because we are not, we work very, very hard to encourage them to do that. And not only that, we have book clubs that we are assisting at Center for the Book to establish. And these book clubs, they target a lot of people. We establish these book clubs in school, and we even give them, donate books to these schools. And most of the books that we donate are the books in indigenous languages, so that we introduce them to books at when they are in schools. And not only that, we've got children under the from age 0 to 7, where we develop writers and illustrators to write for these young ones, because we believe strongly that if we introduce them to books at that age, they will grow reading, and they will end up being lifelong readers. Because in South Africa, we for a very long time, we were not so happy with children's literature that we give our children, because most of it It's works from United States of America. It's works from United Kingdom, Australia. A work that culturally does not talk to culturally and socially, does not talk to these kids. And then now we took it upon ourselves at Center for the Book to say we need to correct this. And those books, now when they are translated into IsiXhosa, and now they change meaning, then your child would ask, what is this, Dad? For an example, a child has never seen snow, but you see a book talking about snow. You see a book talking about a goat or a dog in a car, and yet in there, cars are staying outside and they don't stay with people. So those are other things that we say, no, this need to be corrected, and it must be done. We must do it now. So we've got that program to say, let's train our own illustrators, let's train our own children's writers, and we're doing quite well in that. And in indigenous languages or South African native languages. So yes, book clubs are one of our programs, and then we assist with the writers grant as well as develop a lot of posters to promote reading. Because at Center for the Book, one other program, the International Literacy Day, all these international literary events, we coordinate them at Center for the Book. And as a result, we develop a lot of posters, and then we distribute them to all libraries and schools.
Well, you mentioned content, and so I'm wondering about, with you personally, in terms of content, in terms of experiences, I'm wondering if you could tell us about a personal or cultural or political experience that influenced your writing. When speaking of South Africa, apartheid always is one of the elements brought into a discussion. So I'm just wondering about you, not necessarily apartheid, but something that has influenced your writing that you could tell us about.
There are a lot of things that are influencing my writing, and some of the poems that I have produced, I have written, have been influenced by a lot of things. In South Africa, though, during apartheid era, there was a moment where people were segregated into their own areas. For an example, apartheid system established homeland system. As John was introducing me, he says, I studied at the University of Transkei. Transkei was one of the homeland states in Transkei that was established by the apartheid government, and we thought we were really independent. We thought we were really a state in South Africa, and yet we had our brothers and sisters who went abroad to fight for our own liberation. And then the system made it sure that it embeds on us that we are better than them. And if you talk about your brother who is in United States, who is in Tanzania, who is in UK to fight for the just cause, then you can't talk about him because your brother is a terrorist. Then you read about those things in some of my poems where you say that I am in a subtle way, in a way that you dodge the system. Because if you can address it bluntly, you are sure you are going to jail. Yeah. Then there was those eras that when you write, remember I started writing in 1994, but there were other works that I had written prior 1994, before our independence. And I was also influenced by other writers. There is this writer that I admire most, Siyongwana. I hope you have his book here. And we have reprinted that book, which says Ubulumko Bezinja, loosely translated as Wisdom of Dogs. Because it was so difficult for Rustam to express himself and to tell the story as is, because surely he was gonna go to jail. Then he had to disguise and pretend as if he was just doing a tale, and then where you have got these dogs talking, the dogs fighting with human beings. Now the state could not stop that book because it was just a tale. And yet it was not a tale, it was a story about political situation in South Africa. So politically, my poetry has also been influenced by that. Not only that, there are other social factors that have influenced my poetry. Immediately after the dawn of independence, then we started seeing a lot of crime increasing. Then we started seeing a lot of imbalances, that those who are rich, they become more richer, and those who are poor becomes more poor. So my poetry also addresses that, and some of my essays addresses that, to say no, we cannot be going on like that. If our own statesman Nelson Mandela said this country belongs to all who live in it, black and white. So some of my, not only me though, other writers as well are addressing those issues. And another thorny one that is affecting the country is the issue of HIV and AIDS, where every day we bury families, we bury young ones. Then now and then you start seeing child-headed families because of this pandemic. So there are a lot of poetry, and I also wrote about that in a collection that I produced to say, hey, let's watch this. It's here to kill all of us.
Thank you very much. I think at this point, others should ask questions, and I'll pass the mic. I'll pass the mic to you. So we could take maybe 10 minutes or so for questions.
First, thank you for your reading. It was delightful to hear. Secondly, I'm curious. I was very encouraged by your efforts to use indigenous languages in South Africa, promote them. Do you have links with other groups elsewhere in Africa who do the same thing? Are you aware of groups, say in West Africa, who do what you do to promote, say, Wolof or Yoruba, or in Congo or Central Africa for Cuba and Congo or Kinyarwanda or maybe Kikuyu in the East? Are you aware of other groups in other countries that do what you do, and do you have links with them?
Yes and no. Yes, in that this year we hosted Chinua Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Maybe you know Ngugi. He's an established author who is really vocal about development of mother tongue. And then what we don't have direct links with other groups that are doing the same job in other other African countries, except to read about their works in internet and all that. So yes and no. What really worries us is South Africa at this stage, because we believe that charity begins at home.
Thank you. I have a question. You talked about the Khoisan language, and I was privileged enough to watch a TV program a couple of days ago where somebody was talking to some Khoisan people, and it's a beautiful language, full of a lot more clicks. And I wanted to find out, because Xhosa was influenced by that language, are there others in South Africa that have also incorporated those sounds into their language?
Are there what?
11 of the native languages of South Africa. Are there other languages other than Xhosa that have incorporated some of the sounds of the Khoisan language into their languages?
Yes, isiZulu. isiZulu. Because isiZulu, the Nguni group, you've got isiXhosa, isiZulu, isiNdebele, isiSwati. But the most language that was influenced by the Khoisan people is isiXhosa. That's why I said earlier on that we are not influencing only foreigners. We also influence language speakers from within the country because of the cliques as well. Then the Sotho group and the Venda group. The Sotho group is Setswana, Sepedi, and Sesotho are not influenced by that. They don't have these cliques. So the groups that I can say are really influenced is my language is Xhosa as well as isiZulu, as well as the Nguni group.
I have a question about political correctness. Mother tongue, native language, native tongue. What's a good way to express that? I'm not clear. Sometimes here we're quite concerned about not offending by using an acceptable term for something. And so if you say native tongue, does that hark back to colonial days, or is that something that's acceptable now? Or mother tongue, or mother language? You've said several. The indigenous language.
In South Africa, we really don't use native language, though we do not have any problem with that. Because when you go to our towns, you still find, when you go to Cape Town, you still see that we haven't changed them yet. And now we are 18 years into our democracy. You still have NY, native yard, NYs. And then you go to Eastern Cape, Tanzania, which is the second largest township in the country. You still get these terms, but there are those that we are really working very, very hard to change. But coming to this one, really, we have no problem with mother tongue, native tongue, but in South Africa, politically, we are saying our language, our mother tongue, indigenous languages, African languages, though we do not have a problem with native because now we are native. Because a native is if you check the meaning in dictionary, has no negative connotation at all. Yeah, so we have no problem with that.
Are there any other questions? I would like to thank you again for being here today. And is there anything else you might like to add? Is there something that you would like to tell us about that I have not thought to ask you this afternoon, or something that we really need to know?
Yeah, I cannot go back, ladies and gentlemen, to South Africa without acknowledging the good work that is done by the Library of Congress, and especially my colleague, John Cole. That really has I don't know how to express it, but to say thank you, America, for doing that to the entire world, to put even our countries on the map. I want to touch on this, that yesterday when I was touring the DC, I went to the World War II monument. Then I saw all these countries that participated there. And South Africa was there. Then I said, hallelujah, God is great. And I took a picture of that. And secondly, it's not easy to find, I don't say they're not that they are, but to find an close-up in United States of America. God is great. But what I want also to say, keep up the good work, and also in closing, we want to assure Americans and fellow African Americans that we will never stop fighting for the growth, for the development and use of our indigenous languages, of our African languages, because these are the only things. Languages are the only things that our forebears gave us. We don't have gold, we don't have anything, but at least we have languages. And I always say, when I talk to people, that writing and reading in your indigenous languages is good, in that you, as and myself as Umkhosa, you will never dream in English. Because when ancestors come to you, I mean, when you are a Xhosa person, when ancestors come to you in indigenous, in isiXhosa, and not in English. So we will continue fighting for the development of our indigenous languages. And we hope and sincerely hope that through you guys here, you will assist us in doing that, because I know America has got a lot of resources, a lot of resources. And I am also looking forward to come back here again, because today is my last day with you. And I was saying to John, please talk to President Obama. He must give me a plot so that I come and stay in America. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.